Picture this moment with me. You walk into a jewelry store, bright lights bouncing off polished glass, and there they are, sparkling stones locked behind security cases with price tags that could pay your rent for half a year. Your brain tells you this makes sense because diamonds are precious and rare, one of Earth's most treasured gifts. But what if I told you that everything you believe about these glittering rocks is built on one of the greatest marketing illusions ever constructed? What if the scarcity you assume exists is nothing more than a carefully engineered lie that spans over a century? The truth is, diamonds exist in such massive quantities across our planet that they should cost a fraction of what we pay, yet here we are, emptying our savings accounts for engagement rings because a corporation decided decades ago that this is what love looks like. This is the story of how a single company rewired human psychology, manipulated global markets, and convinced billions of people that compressed carbon equals eternal devotion. Let me take you back to the 1870s when everything changed in South Africa. Before this moment in history, diamonds genuinely were rare treasures, found in small deposits scattered across India and Brazil, accessible only to monarchs and the extraordinarily wealthy. Then workers discovered massive diamond fields in Kimberley, and suddenly the market faced an existential crisis. These new deposits contained so many stones that prices would naturally collapse if they all entered circulation. A British entrepreneur named Cecil Rhodes recognized both the danger and the opportunity unfolding before him. He began acquiring mine after mine, consolidating power until 1888 when he established De Beers Consolidated Mines. By controlling nearly all South African production, Rhodes could determine exactly how many diamonds reached consumers, but the real mastermind arrived later. Ernest Oppenheimer took the reins in 1927 and implemented a strategy so elegant in its simplicity that it would define the industry for generations. Purchase every diamond possible, restrict what enters the market, and most importantly, make people desperate to buy them. By mid-century, this company controlled roughly 80% of the world's rough diamond supply, and they weren't just dominating a market, they were essentially running it as their private operation. Now, here comes the truly fascinating part. Controlling supply means nothing if nobody wants your product, and before the late 1930s, diamond engagement rings were genuinely unusual. Most American couples never considered them essential to marriage proposals. De Beers understood they needed to manufacture desire itself, so in 1938 they partnered with N.W. Iyer Advertising Agency and launched what would become perhaps the most influential marketing operation in commercial history. They didn't simply advertise diamonds. They planted an idea deep within American consciousness, embedding the notion that a man's love could be measured by the size of the stone he placed on his partner's finger. Celebrity endorsements, magazine placements, movie product integrations, everything worked together to establish diamonds as the ultimate symbol of commitment. Then in 1947 came the phrase that sealed everything. Those four simple words, "A diamond is forever," accomplished something remarkable. Beyond suggesting emotional permanence, the slogan subtly discouraged resale. If your diamond represents eternal love, you would never sell it. And if nobody sells their diamonds, no secondary market develops to undercut prices. The transformation was staggering. In 1939, barely 10% of engagement rings featured diamonds. By 1990, that number had exploded to 80%. And today it exceeds 85%. De Beers hadn't discovered consumer demand. They had manufactured it from nothing. The company's distribution system was equally calculated. Every 5 weeks, approximately 125 hand-picked dealers called sightholders would arrive at De Beers headquarters in London for what the company termed viewings. These weren't negotiations. Each dealer received a box of diamonds with prices predetermined by De Beers. and they faced a simple choice: accept everything at the stated price, or reject the entire box. Anyone who pushed back or attempted bargaining risked permanent exclusion from future sales, effectively destroying their business since De Beers controlled the primary global supply. This system allowed the company to determine not just quantity, but which specific diamonds entered, which markets at which prices. Under normal circumstances, such practices would violate antitrust regulations, but De Beers operated from South Africa and sold through London while avoiding direct operations in the United States, despite Americans being their largest customer base. They essentially ran a global monopoly while remaining untouchable by American law enforcement. Competition did emerge throughout the 20th century, but De Beers had an answer for every threat. When Soviet geologists discovered significant deposits in Siberian permafrost during the 1950s, De Beers didn't fight Moscow. Instead, they negotiated agreements to purchase and distribute Russian production through their own channels. When Australia's Argyle mine began producing in the 1980s, De Beers initially absorbed those diamonds too. Their philosophy remained consistent: buy everything to maintain supply control, but this strategy carried enormous costs. By the early 1980s, the company was spending hundreds of millions annually purchasing excess inventory to prevent price drops, essentially operating a massive stockpiling operation that bought during surplus periods and released during shortages. It worked beautifully until the 1990s, when the world began shifting beneath their feet. The collapse of apartheid in South Africa and the Soviet Union's dissolution fundamentally altered the landscape. Suddenly, De Beers couldn't operate with the same political flexibility. Russian producer Alrosa, Australian operations, and newly discovered Canadian deposits began selling independently, bypassing the traditional De Beers channel entirely. For the first time in nearly a century, significant diamond volumes reached markets without passing through a single company's hands. Market share plummeted from 80% in the 1980s to 65% by 2000, eventually falling below 40%. Many viewers interested in understanding this industry transformation should check out documentaries examining how these market shifts occurred, similar to content exploring why engagement rings cost so much or how monopolies shape pricing. The changes were profound, even if most consumers remained unaware. Legal troubles compounded these challenges. In 2005, De Beers finally settled with the U.S. Department of Justice, paying $250 million to resolve price-fixing allegations, plus an additional $45 million for related lawsuits. This settlement finally permitted direct operations in America, their most valuable market, but by then the company had already begun pivoting from commodity controller to luxury retailer. Meanwhile, another crisis demanded attention. Blood diamonds mined in conflict zones across Angola, Sierra Leone, and Liberia had funded brutal civil wars, and public awareness was growing. The industry responded with the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme in 2003, and De Beers positioned itself as an ethical leader, attempting to rehabilitate its image while the market it once dominated continued fragmenting. Then came the threat nobody anticipated becoming serious: laboratory-grown diamonds. These aren't fake crystals or imitations, but chemically identical stones created in controlled environments, indistinguishable from mined diamonds to any consumer, yet produced at dramatically lower costs. De Beers initially dismissed them, spending millions on campaigns, emphasizing the supposed inferiority of synthetic stones, protecting what they called real diamonds. But consumer interest grew as laboratory production improved and prices dropped. So De Beers adapted again. In 2018, they launched Lightbox, their own lab-grown brand, but priced these diamonds remarkably low, around $800 per carat, compared to thousands charged by competitors. The strategy was transparent. By entering the lab-grown market at rock-bottom prices, they aim to position all synthetic diamonds as cheap mass-market products unworthy of serious consideration, thereby preserving the prestige of natural stones. It was market manipulation dressed as market participation. Consider how deeply this company's influence penetrates our culture. The so-called guideline suggesting men spend 2 months' salary on engagement rings originated as De Beers marketing, initially positioned as 1 month before being increased. This completely invented benchmark has pressured countless people into financial strain, pursuing an arbitrary standard. Meanwhile, diamonds retain value poorly. Try reselling an engagement ring, and you'll likely receive less than half what you paid, because the secondary market that could establish fair pricing was deliberately suppressed. The perception of diamonds as investments is largely fantasy. They're consumption items dressed up as stores of value by a company that needed you to believe they were precious. Today's diamond industry looks fundamentally different from its 20th century predecessor. De Beers controls approximately 35% of the market, while Russia's Alrosa holds around 30%, with remaining production scattered among various international operations. Yet, despite this fragmentation, prices remain remarkably high, proving how effectively one company established perceived value that outlasted its actual market dominance. Younger generations show growing skepticism, preferring alternative stones, lab-grown options, or foregoing traditional jewelry entirely for experiences, but cultural programming runs deep. The diamond engagement ring remains standard because De Beers saw pie, decades making it unthinkable to propose otherwise. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is this: diamonds are not genuinely scarce. We've simply been conditioned to believe otherwise through one of history's most successful psychological operations. The sparkling stone on your finger or behind that glass case represents not rarity or inherent worth, but the triumph of manufactured desire over economic reality. Every time we pay thousands for compressed carbon, we validate a system built on artificial scarcity and sustained through cultural manipulation that began before most of us were born. If this story made you think differently about what we consider valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden forces shaping our world. Your support helps us keep uncovering these stories.